All right, Big Bang. Today is Tuesday. It's August 8th. Welcome to the Dog Walk presented by Barstool Sports. Here with Chief as always. Chief, how we doing?
I'm a little freaked out.
Yeah, it sounds like we got a little spooky story today.
Yeah. This is like one of those ones where it's like I might actually make some changes to my life after doing the research on this.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So this is based off of a movie? A movie based off of a real thing?
So I think there's two movies that center around this topic. And the more famous one is Erin Brockovich. It's Julia Roberts. I feel like I don't know exactly when that came out, but probably within the last 20 years, right?
Yep.
And then Mark Ruffalo had one called Dark Waters, and we'll get into that case a little bit. That movie came out in 2019. I want to say that I saw it on like Amazon Prime or something like that.
And wasn't Jennifer Love Hewitt was in it?
In Dark Waters?
Dark Water, or am I wrong?
I don't think so. The only person there was a guy that I recognized from like HBO shows.
There's a Jennifer Love Hewitt, or excuse me, Jennifer Connelly. Wow, they look very similar in this picture. That's called Dark Water. That's why I got confused.
Okay.
That came out in 2005.
Okay.
So sorry.
Unfamiliar with that one. Is that about the same thing?
I don't think so, but I don't really know because when you told me the topic, I looked up that and that's what I saw.
So
I don't think so. Though.
So Mark Ruffalo is the star. Anne Hathaway's in it. Tim Robbins is in it. Bill Pullman's in it. And then the guy that I'm like, there's that guy. His name is Bill Camp. He's been in like a ton of, like you would recognize his face, but he's been in like a ton of, I feel like HBO specific shows. And he's awesome. Like he's kind of like, he's one of those actors where if I see him, I'm like, it's probably good because I feel like he's only in like pretty good stuff. Yeah. So, and then the guy from Titanic, Victor Garber. So anyways, so that case, and that was about, so really what sparked this, okay, this topic today was I was just looking for stuff for us, recently, what would be interesting. And I came across a story from the end of June, which I missed. And you said you hadn't seen it either, which was there was a settlement that DuPont, and they have two spinoff companies, that they were going to pay a $1.19 billion settlement for poisoning water supplies with these toxic chemicals. And we'll get into what they are, but they're called PFAS. It's PFAS. And then as I was looking up that, like 3 days later, like right around same end of June of this year, so we're talking like 6 weeks ago, 3M, and people like, you can't get through the day without seeing a 3M product. So it's duct tape, it's like the little stick-on hooks. 3M is a giant chemical company that makes all sorts of stuff. Scotch Guard, we'll get into that too, but they had a settlement for $10 billion, $10.3 billion. So at the same time, you have two of the world's largest chemical companies settling out of court rather, for billions of dollars because they're poisoning what turns out like fucking everyone on the planet. And so I like start digging into it more. And it's like, holy shit. So the one from the movie, the settlement from the movie, that Dark Waters with Mark Ruffalo, which I very good movie. I recommend people watch that movie. I don't know what it's, let's see if it has a rating.
A positive review.
Yeah, I really liked it. 89% on Rotten Tomatoes. That's pretty high.
Pretty high.
So, but a movie that I feel like, I don't know, people don't really talk about very much. But anyways, so that settlement that's dealt specifically with people in West Virginia. Maybe I think it started 10 years ago, like that process, maybe less than that even. And they settled that one for $700 million, and it was to clean up water supplies. And there were some also personal injury stuff of various people. They poisoned the water supply of over 100,000 people in West Virginia. So that was like another settlement.
Hey, let's pause here to talk about ChevyDriveChicago.com. Bears fans, we have huge breaking news. The Chicagoland and Northwest Indiana Chevy dealers are proud to announce that they are the official new partners of the Chicago Bears.
Huge.
Awesome.
Yep.
Tailgating this year's got a whole lot more exciting, Chief.
I mean, it's going to be an exciting year. You might as well start right in the parking lot and get yourself there in a Chevy. There's nothing better than that.
Yeah, I mean, the all-new Silverado is really what you need to kick off this Bears season. You pull up to the south lot, Waldron deck, it doesn't matter. You pop open that tailgate.
That's
party
awesome. Time.
Yeah,
that's party time.
That's it. So go check that out. You go to ChevyDriveChicago.com to shop and find your local Chevy dealer today. And, of course, obviously, if you're not in the market for a truck, they have a ton of other vehicles. You guys know Chevy. It's Americana.
Sure is.
Beautiful brand.
Love me some Americana.
You love that, Dave. I love it, too. Welcome to Tuesday's episode, Dave. Which I'm happy.
to be here,
I'm happy you did, and I'm happy for ChevyDriveChicago.com. Go check that out.
I mean, he gave me the look.
No, I know. I wanted you to. I'm happy you did. So yeah, shout out to Chevy. We love Chevy. We're excited for the Bears. We're excited to be with Chevy. And honestly, go grab yourself a Chevy. All right, let's get back into the show.
But this is a much larger case than that, because I think that kind of sparked this whole like investigation into, well, where else are these things? And 3M is a multinational, billions upon billions of dollar conglomerate with factories and plants and products all over the world. And because they make like fucking everything, and they make these PFAs, and the one that people most closely associate, or like when they talk about it, is the cookware, right? It's the nonstick Teflon is the product. You know what Teflon is, right? Mm-hmm. You know, but it's not just in that. It's in, so like, it's, if you have like a sofa and it's stain resistant, okay, you spray it with Scotchgard. Scotchgard is a PFA. It's in fast food packaging. It's in pesticides. It's in like microwave popcorn bags, pizza boxes, candy wrappers. It's all over like makeup, nail polish, dental floss, cleaning products, paint for the walls, like I said, nonstick cookware, shampoo, and then like any sort of like rain jacket, starter jacket, any kind of like water resistant, anything that you would wear has these PFAs in it. And the reason that this is like a problem, okay, is because PFAs were something that was actually, I mean, I feel like we've been talking about Oppenheimer a lot. They were first used, these PFAs were used, and I don't know exactly how they were applied, but I found that somewhere along the way, in the Manhattan Project. So they were used as part of like the, as a chemical base to like help with the construction of the atom bomb. And then when and it was discovered originally by DuPont Chemicals in the late 30s, and then when it was like after the war, when like those PFAs became declassified, they started making products commercially, like I said, in all sorts of different uses. But this chemical, it's a chemical compound, and a PFA, it stands, I'm gonna have a hard time pronouncing it because I'm not a fucking chemist, but it's polyfluoroalcohol or alkyl, and it's like an alkaline, and it's this long strand of chemicals like carbon and fluoride bound together, and it is literally like indestructible. It is indestructible, and it's been given the nickname by this like Harvard scientist in the last 10 years or so called the forever chemical, because it doesn't break down in nature. It doesn't exist in nature normally. Like it's so like nobody has any way to process. It was just like created in a lab, and it's a super strong, resistant little binding chemical, and it's causing it's been linked to all sorts of problems, which is why people are trying to sue them and settle with them, because it is very, very dangerous. And it's so strong that it won't break down until the heat temperature gets over 1,000 degrees Celsius. So like 100 degrees Celsius is boiling. So think of like how hot that has to be, 1,000 degrees Celsius, in order for these things to break down. It's like nearly impossible. And it's fucking everywhere. Okay. So because it's been in use, widespread use, and been manufactured now for 60, 70, 80 years, there are studies that say that it's found in 45% of all tap water in America. So they originally did this study and they're like, oh, well, 7 million Americans are exposed to this chemical compound just in their drinking water and their tap water. And it's found more commonly in people that use like their own just wells, like their ground wells. But now, as they're doing more and more studies, they've upped that number to 45% of all drinking water in the United States contains these PFAs, because
like bottled and everything.
I think there's certain filtration systems, okay, but then it's like the packaging. You have to make sure the packaging doesn't have these PFAs. But because you can filter it and you can remove it from the water supply and things like that, and that's what a lot of these lawsuits are about. Like they have come up with these better filtration systems and better cleanup systems, which didn't exist until more recently, to get it out. But even once they get it out, they still don't know like what to do with it, because they can't, like, there's no way to dispose of it. So it's like, what do you have to like shoot it into outer space or something? Like it just like, because it's so toxic. And the reason why it is so toxic is because, like I said, it doesn't break down, like I said, and then it has this process called it bioaccumulates. So once it's in your body, it is very hard. It'll attach itself to different organs and cells and just kind of like live in your body forever. You can urinate it out, or like, it's not like once it's in there, it's all in there, but it does kind of stay with you for life, to the point that they have found that 99% of humans that they've studied have levels of PFAs in their blood, okay? Because you just don't get rid of it. So it is like this very harmful toxin, okay? And it's when you have these in your system, you have an increased risk of hormone balance, decreased birth rate, higher cholesterol, testicular cancer, prostate cancer, pancreatic cancer, liver cancer. It can damage like your own like DNA strand when it's in there, and you can have birth defects too. So it's like a very toxic, harmful product that is just ubiquitous on Earth now, because there's no way to get rid of it, because it just doesn't decompose and doesn't break down, and it just gets into your bloodstream. It attaches to plant matter, so it's in your food, it's in soils, and it's like literally everywhere, and it's poisoning fucking everyone, okay? And if you're near, there are certain places that are higher risk. So another product it's in is this like flame retardant foam spray. Have you seen that? Where they put it inside of buildings, and they and then like fire schools will like use it, and military bases will use it a lot in different, and then it just like seeps into the soil and into the groundwater. So if you live near a military base, you're much more likely to have exposure to that. And that was like another thing when I was researching it, and my radar's up on everything all the time now. So you're Googling like the 3M lawsuit, okay? And 3M is being sued, okay, by former service members for hearing loss, because they also manufacture like these earplugs that supposedly were defective. So if you're doing artillery or whatever, where you have loud noises and you're in the military and you need ear protection, that they didn't work. So they're being sued for that. But it's like a much smaller number of people that it's impacting, and a much smaller settlement number. But that's like the most prevalent story when you just get on Google. I found that odd. I'm not saying, I'm just saying that it's odd. So the thing that they're getting in so much trouble about, and I think this was highlighted in the movie as well, is that DuPont and 3M knew that this was toxic, because they started manufacturing it, like I said, I think in a big way in the 50s and 60s, these PFAs. And there's over 12,000 different chemical compounds that are under this umbrella of PFAs. So they use it in all sorts of different stuff, but it's everywhere, and they've been making it for a long time. These two companies noticed that their own employees were having these high rates of medical issues that I listed out before with all the cancers and all these different problems. And they're like, we should do a study. This is back in the 70s. Okay. They found this out back in the 70s. And they had internal documents that were found in discovery through some of these lawsuits that they knew in 1978 that this was a real problem, because they were doing studies of PFAs on like monkeys and stuff, like internal studies. And they're like, oh, fuck, like this is a real problem. They didn't do anything about it. They didn't tell the EPA. They didn't tell the communities that it could have been impacting. They didn't tell the consumers. They didn't tell their own employees. They didn't tell fucking anybody. They just continued to make it. You know why?
Because
these companies, okay, on Teflon alone. So remember I said they got sued for, and they settled for $700 million, and it's paid out over a period of like, years and years, right?
Yeah.
Okay. They're making on Teflon still to this day $1 billion a year, just Teflon, just on like the cookware. Okay. $1 billion a year on the Teflon, like component. So they're making a fucking insane amount of money. So they're just like, I don't know, fucking put this in a locked file somewhere. Like, don't tell fucking anyone. And then they just continue to do it. And while knowing that it was this super toxic chemical, they dumped hundreds of tons of these PFA like waste material into the Ohio River. And that's what the Dark Water movie was about. Okay.
Fuck.
They just dumped it into the river. So it was in everybody's drinking water. It was impacting all these farmers. You're raising dairy cows, it gets in the milk. You're raising, other animals, it gets in their supply. So it's in your food chain. And because it doesn't break down, if it's in a chicken and you eat that chicken, now it's in you. Okay. So it just moves on up the food chain. If it's in feed corn for cows, if it's in, wheat or whatever, it's just going to be consumed, bioaccumulate in the animal. You eat that animal, now it's in you, and it just moves its way up the food chain because it is indestructible. And then they said, so now it became like a thing, right? So they said by the early 2000s, the average American had 5 times the amount of PFAs in their blood. So you, me, Harry, fucking everybody. They had 5 times the amount of PFAs in their blood that DuPont and 3M say is safe for just the water in their own factories. So they're like, because they're making it all the time, and they're like in these areas, they're testing their own shit. And the average American has 5 times the amount of PFAs that they say is safe for their own drinking water. So if the levels go up, they shut it down, filter it, do whatever, because they know it's not safe. But we're all just walking around with it all the time. And it's like I said, it's leading to all these things. So they actually, through some of these settlements and other lawsuits that they've had against them, it funded the largest I struggle with that word. The largest medical study, epidemiological study in history, and it was conducted on these PFAs. It's because they have so many people that have it. They did a study with 71,000 participants. That's what I mean by largest, the largest amount of participants. And researchers proved a link to kidney cancer, testicular cancer, thyroid disease, which your thyroid really does regulate your hormones, your hormone levels, high cholesterol, something called preeclampsia, and then ulcerative colitis. So I feel like I see things like, oh, do you have ulcerative colitis? Yeah. Like these class action lawsuits, right? And like I said, I'm just going through my notes here. They did settle that West Virginia case for $700 million. And then they've continued to do further studies, and they've determined like what is the quote unquote safe amount for these PFAs in your water supply and in your water. And the number that they've come up with is 1 part per trillion. Okay. And that it would be the equivalent of a drop of PFAs in like approximately 3 Olympic-sized swimming pools is what they say is safe to have. So it is fucking everywhere, and it's very unsafe. And I said that there was like how it moves up the food chain. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it also, another way that it can leave your body is when women are pregnant. So if they're pregnant, they're sharing all their blood. So those infants that are in utero, and then when they're, after they're born, they're being breastfed, those infants are also getting the PFAs directly from their mother unknowingly. They're just trying to be good mothers, but it's just like they can't do anything about it. And they don't necessarily know about it. So these babies that are having, they're more vulnerable because they have a more vulnerable immune system. They actually share their mother's immune system for for a period even after birth. They just have all the same immunities as their mother, which is like a weird fact. We should have Kate in to talk about that kind of like all the weird anomalies with mothers and their babies. But they have their organs are still being developed. There's something you have called a blood-brain barrier, which the human body is fucking amazing, but it's like this super filter that doesn't allow like toxins typically to get into your brain. But there's certain things like these PFAs that they think can get into your brain, and like there's other things like that too. But the infants are more vulnerable, so you're seeing an uptick in all these kind of like chronic health issues since these PFAs have become more and more ubiquitous across the planet. Like they've tested in Alaska, they've tested in Chile, they've tested in Australia. They're fucking everywhere in all these different soils. And same thing, like this is another case that was going on in Antwerp, in Belgium, where you had a 3M factory, then you had this big highway, and then on the other side of the highway you had all this like a traditional like suburban farming community, and there are people there like getting sick. Okay. And then the city decided, as like they're going to try to improve traffic, and they're going to dig this tunnel, and they were going to, build this other road. So it was going to be a heavy construction project. So 3M, because this was happening right next to their factory where they were making all this shit, they're like, oh fuck. Like this is a problem. So they cut a deal with the construction company, and it was like, hey, when you're digging up these soils, be careful and bring those soils to our property. And they're like, we're going to build a security wall. And it's basically just a toxic dump that they have sealed over with like these giant like rubber looking, kind of like a giant garbage bag to seal in all this toxic soil, because they didn't want studies to be done on the soil because they knew how toxic it was. And then they ended up having a case with those people from that area where they settled for like $600 million or $545 million or something like that. But they tested this old lady's blood as part of this study, and she was like 70 years old, and they were like, your blood has the amount of toxins as like a toxic waste dump, like by percentage. It's like unbelievable. And she's like, and she, had all sorts of like medical issues, and she was just like a person who was living as a farmer, like living her life, but she just happened to be in close proximity to this 3M chemical plant. And that's why she was so unhealthy. It was because like just she had to be where she was. And that's like the like, if you're 3M and DuPont, you're probably like, yeah, we'll take this $10 billion settlement and the other $1 billion settlement, because this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Oh yeah.
Because so they settled with they did this settlement, and for whatever reason, it was like this. It was the communities, like the local communities, like the local governments, are the ones that are have been suing them, and they're like, okay, we have to settle with them. And what they're suing for is basically the cleanup costs and the filtration costs to fix the soil, but really, first and foremost, fix the water supply. Because like I said, there are filters. Once you get the stuff out, no one really knows what to do, but there are filters supposedly that work to get some of the stuff out of the water supply. So they settled for $10 billion, and now various states are moving in because they're like, this is not nearly enough money, because Orange County, California alone has estimated the cost to clean up their water supply and their soils and stuff at 1.1 billion. So they're like, if you're paying out all these people over a period of 13 years, no one's ever really going to get enough money to do what is needed. So they're trying to block this settlement and have it be a bigger thing. They have, so they settled this one for the $10 billion. They currently have, both companies currently have over 4,000 lawsuits ongoing that haven't been settled from these various communities. So, and that was like another problem. People tried to go, these different like local governments and different states were trying to get the EPA to go after DuPont, and they were like, the EPA was like dragging their feet, probably because they're like an agency captured type of situation where DuPont will be like, we'll fund this study, we'll fund this position, and there's all that kind of bullshit going on. So they were dragging their feet. So New Jersey and Massachusetts specifically were like, we can't wait around for this anymore. We're suing you. So fuck the EPA. We're going to do it on our own. And now it's like, it's triggered like this big thing where it's like, they just we'll do the $10 billion settlement because they know like that's getting off easy. Cause like I said, they're doing $1 billion a year anyways. And if they're only having to pay out 13 billion or the pay out 10 billion over 13 years, like it's a big number, but not really. And it won't really fix anything. So and then on top of that, there's an estimated 5,000 to 6,000 personal injury lawsuits from just various individuals who have all these different health ailments that they're like, I've basically gone bankrupt because I've been drinking the water that you poisoned knowingly, that you knew you were poisoning it for almost 50 years now. And so that's what's going on. So this is going to be a thing going on forever. So there was a movie in 2019. You could probably have a movie in 2025 and 2030 and like another Aaron Brockovich. And this is just, who knows like how deep this goes. And you look at like, you know, we're the most unhealthy nation like in the world. We have the highest healthcare cost, like basically by any standard, we have the highest healthcare costs. We have an unhealthy population. We have the most chronic disease. And it's like, you know, I'm sure some of it is, you know, diet, lifestyle, all this stuff. But I bet you a lot of it is just where we're just walking around in toxins all the time because these massive companies are, you know, doing like with reckless abandon, just dumping toxins into the water supply, knowing that it's toxic because they don't want to pay to have like proper storage and cleanup and things like that.
It's like a slightly less sinister Sackler family, you know.
I don't know if it's less.
I
think it's more.
I think based upon like the circle of life drugs is like.
I think the drugs is more acute, but I don't know if it's worse.
They're both really bad. So like I said, slightly less in my opinion, just because like the circle of life, the drugs will beat you in and like how it tears apart families, like in real time.
Right.
Like of course this is in a long term.
It's a shorter cycle.
Too, yes.
Yeah. But this is more expensive and it impacts far more people.
Yeah.
If it's in 99% of the people that they test in America, that's like
crazy. Yeah.
Crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And so now it's like, you know, you got to go home and throw away all your pots. You know, like you have to just have, I don't know what the best ones are, if they're granite or stainless steel or whatever, but you got to like look at that stuff because it can like, if it's corroding your DNA and you know, giving, even like forget about the cancers to a degree because, you know, some people are always going to be more susceptible, but we have higher rates of cancer than other places. You know, like we have all these issues. And
but it's just like, I don't know, we're all fucked. Like, what are you going to, is it sugar? Is it, you know what I mean? Is it,
yes.
It's just, what are you going to do? I remember hearing once
you take a stand.
Yeah. I remember the one side hearing that people who live near highways, they are more susceptible to some type of cancer because every
like
time there's bumper, yes, you've heard of that too, right? Every time
it's
someone
not even highways. If you're living on a place like, let's say you live on Ashland, okay, where it's like, or Western, okay, and you live on that, like your air is not going to be as clean as if you're 4 blocks inland. And city people in general just have I mean, you can even feel that. Like I feel that when I go out to visit my parents, like you can smell the air. It's better because they live across the street from like a farm, and out in St. Charles. So it is just like you just feel like the air quality is definitely different. And we get like the warning. I mean, this is Canadian wildfires and shit like that. But like you can definitely tell from like when you're in the country versus in the city, like the air quality and how you feel.
For sure.
And I do think it is like, well, we're all fucked. I don't want to just be like, we're all fucked, so let these people continue to poison us forever. I think there needs to be like awareness, and like if I didn't have like the sticker shock from that headline, and I had seen the movie, but I was like, oh, that was West Virginia. Oh, that sucks for those people in West Virginia. And I had seen Aaron Brockovich a million years ago, and I think that was in Texas. And that sucks for those people that live near that place in Texas. But if I hadn't seen like the 1 billion, which led me to read about the 10 billion, and it's like, then it's like you keep reading. It's like, wait a second, what the fuck? Like this stuff is poisoning everyone everywhere, and it's like, and it bioaccumulates, right? So like once it's in you, it concentrates around that area until it becomes a problem. So like we said that like 1 part per trillion or whatever, okay? And it's like you can have some in your bloodstream and not necessarily notice the effects, but it might be having effects and it's just so normal to us that we don't necessarily notice every day, but it is like giving us issues, and as it accumulates over time, it's just more and more problems. So it's something that I feel like people should be cognizant of, to at least be aware, so you can try to control what you can control. Like you're not going to be able to control like the fucking brake dust unless you want to move out to the middle of nowhere. But you can probably control what you cook your eggs on. You know, like you can get a stone or a clay pot that's, you know, that they've been cooking in for 60,000 years.
Yeah, but I'm sure those have problems too. I don't know.
But they don't, because they've tested them.
Yeah, but you know what I mean. Like it's the old adage, like they don't now.
But
like now,
that is also a strategy. That's a strategy where they fund these studies to muddy the waters. That was like the famous. That's how they came up with the food pyramid. Do you know that's? I think we talked about that, where that was really driven by big ag, and they had commercial big sugar. Okay, like where they're like, hey, like, just say a calorie is a calorie. And, you know, so if you're having 500 calories of sugar, it's the same as having 500 calories of a steak or I don't know, you'd have to eat a shit ton of spinach, but like it's not. Your body, your liver processes it differently. Like it's not the same. And you can, but they had like this Harvard, nutritionist in the 50s and 60s who would do his own studies, and he was paid by, the Sugar USA, like the board of sugar producers in the country, and they would pay him to come up with these studies, and then those same people would pay to have it in the New York Times, and they would, until it became like the thing. And then it was like, wait a second, we're having all these problems. And it's like, we did this 30-year study, 40-year study, and it was like, oh yeah, like that guy, he was actually full of shit. And here's all the documents that prove it, that we found in Freedom of Information Act or a lawsuit in discovery. And it was like, yeah, the guy that he was debating, that they discredited, and he lost his license and all that, that was all fueled by money and greed. And now we have generations of sick people. It's fucked up.
Yeah.
So
no, I know.
Yeah.
Like, I remember, like,
I hear you. Like, you don't know what to believe.
Yeah. It was like, remember, like, it was always like, well, if you want to get back in shit, you gotta be cramming chicken breast and tilapia. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And then it's like, oh, guess what? Tilapia is not good anymore. Shit like that happens all the time.
Was that just a joke, or are you talking tilapia specifically?
Tilapia specifically.
We could talk about.
But there was like a study, and like this was years and years ago.
And then there's like a study on a study on a study.
Yes,
exactly. It's like they're always, and I was listening to this person, and they were talking about how they bring these cases like before court. It was actually that Rob, the guy who was the Mark Ruffalo character, and he's like, we go up and we're presenting in front of a judge and a jury about these cases against DuPont, and we have these experts, and they're from we have experts from Harvard, Yale, and Stanford. And then DuPont gets up, and they have experts saying the complete opposite thing, and they're from Harvard, Yale, and Stanford. So it's like, and they say competing data and different studies, and it's up to the jury to say and the judge to say who is the more compelling, who has the more compelling evidence. And in that case, in the West Virginia case, they sided with the people, basically all the people who have been fucking poisoned.
Yeah.
And their side, because it's like, if you really get into it, it's like, yeah, like those people, you can manipulate the data all you want, and then they settle out of court, and DuPont gets to say as part of the settlement that we weren't at fault, and then these PFAs aren't bad. And they actually, I think DuPont, I'm getting these backwards. One of the companies stopped making this specific type of PFA in 2003, and the other one stopped making it in 2013. And they're like, hey, we're going to come up with this new version that's going to be a lot safer. So they're kind of admitting, even though the official settlements were we didn't do anything wrong, and we're not culpable, even though we're paying this, because they don't there's a difference between you settle out of court and you get to say the stipulations, which the Sacklers kind of did that for the first case too. We were not, basically it's we're not guilty, but we're going to pay you for damages. It was negligence versus intent, is my understanding. So where they're they're going to invent these shorter strands of these PFAs. So they started using those instead, and they were applauded for it, and they're happy because they can make still be making a profit or whatever. They're billions of dollars a year. But then it turns out that these shorter strands, while they might be as a one-to-one comparison, less toxic, because they're this smaller particle, a smaller compound, they move more easily. So it's it won't attach to, it'll have a wider range of spread and move more freely through the body, and it's harder to get out, because it's smaller, so it can move more freely, but it's still toxic, but it's maybe not as toxic, but you might get more of them, because it's smaller and a more mobile compound.
Yeah.
So it's fucked up, and it's I don't know what to do, to your point, but it's
then supposedly you have a credit card worth of plastic in your system.
Yeah, I've heard that too.
So
but
much shit, dude.
And you probably do, right?
Yeah.
But it's so much of that, that could be it's not people think, you hear that and you're I got a fucking credit card floating around in there, but it's these microparticles, and you could get it from if you have a piece of salmon and it's just in the salmon and you just eat it and you don't even know, but it doesn't break down and doesn't flush out of your gut, so it just kind of sits in there. It's not great. We got to get rid of some of this shit.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Oh, sometimes I wonder if how much smarter I would be if I didn't have all these toxins running around my body. Because we're the first generation to really be impacted by this our entire lives. Because our parents, it became more prevalent in the 70s. Our parents went through most of their childhood with having, and same thing, these are in pesticides and things like that, these PFAs, and we could probably do a whole thing on Roundup too, glyphosate. But they didn't have that as they were in their formative years, because it wasn't as widely used until the 80s.
Yeah.
So then we were the first generation, basically millennials were the first generation of people to have it in their systems from the time that they're on their mom's tit. They were getting these poisons into their brain the whole time. So in another 30 years, when we're 60 and everybody's sick, worse than the generation now, they're probably going to be doing these studies and more lawsuits. And like I said, this is probably these lawsuits against DuPont and 3M is just it's just starting, because they have 4,000 pending with these different communities and 6,000 right now, and probably more every day.
Where the fuck are the regulators?
There's like agency capture. That's the EPA's job. That's the EPA's job. But it's like you look at, oh, like this guy got this legislation approved, and that's come out in court, where it's like these different, whether it's pharmaceuticals or the EPA or the people that are supposed to be regulating, even going back to like the mortgage crisis. They're supposed to be regulating, so they can't take these ungodly risks that the taxpayers have to then front, so then they can pay themselves more, and then places like BlackRock just come in and take all that liquidity and buy up all these cheap houses, so that makes the housing market like impossible to get into. Like, you just got into it, it's so fucking hard and expensive compared to what our parents like. It's like that same house, let's say that was in the 90s when our parents would have been buying houses, was like $180,000. And now it's like $700,000, and it's like your earnings and with the interest rates, like your earnings have not been able to match what the housing market prices are, and it's artificially propped up by these massive companies that are buying up single family homes and apartment buildings and all these things and then they just rent them out, and or they try to flip them or whatever. But it's just like, it's not like, I almost feel like there should be legislation against major investment banks buying real estate. If you want to buy like a downtown building or something like that, like office space, fine. You want to buy like the 3-bedroom house down the street, I don't think that should be allowed. Like, those should be that should be like I don't know how you do this with like capitalism and free markets. But it's almost like those homes should be for, like, if their house is designed for families, they should only be allowed to be purchased by families. Yeah. And because that's how it was. Like, this is like a new concept in the last 20 years, where major corporations are buying up single family homes. That had never really happened before at scale. So there's people wonder why everything's falling apart. Okay. Because there's all this just insane greed, and nobody's watching, or they're in cahoots, and it's sickening. And this is an example of that with the states and the local communities have to be like, all right, we can't wait for the EPA, because the EPA is not doing shit. Yeah. We have to do it ourselves.
It's just unfathomable.
It is, and like the scale of this and like the corruption and the greed is. It is beyond me. It is beyond every time. Like, because I started researching this, like, we were talking about it last night, and I probably read things for like 6 or 7 hours. Right. Because I was just like, what in the fuck is going on? And it's just like every little kernel that you find, it's like, okay, well, I'm going to research that case. And it's like, Jesus Christ. And so you just keep digging and digging and digging. And it's like every layer reveals something more grotesque than before. Like the EPA just doing stall tactics against the people. So to help out DuPont and 3M, it's like, what? Then why do you even exist? Yeah. So it's sickening.
Crazy shit, dude. Yeah. I just, like I said, unfathomable is like the only word that I have. All right, then.
What a really fun late
Good
episode.
Luck, everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hope you have a nice Tuesday. Yeah.
All right.
On that note, we'll see you tomorrow for a free swim. I think that'll be a little more upbeat and positive.
We'll see.
Yeah. Last week's was not.
Was not.
Yeah. All right, then. For real. See you, though, tomorrow.